Hey there, welcome back to 16 Stops a Podcast. My name is Josh and I'm here with Brandon.
What's up?
And today we're going to talk about Sony's recycling program. All right, Brandon, welcome back.
Let's just get it out of the way.
All right, Brandon, what's up, man?
I'm well aware that I'm in a neck brace. So
Okay.
I kind of thought, like, would it be funnier if we just did the whole episode and didn't even bring this up?
But yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. I know you probably don't want to talk about it too much. I know you made a nice video on your channel to explain it, but give people a little bit of a rundown.
Deal. First of all, it just looks worse than it actually is. This is more precautionary than anything else. Last Sunday, so like 8 or 9 days ago during jiu-jitsu, I just got tacoed. I got put in a weird position during a drill, and it ended up, popping my neck. And it was kind of scary at first because the EMTs had to come in and like actually cut my clothes off me to put a brace on me, and then they had to like roll me over and put me on a board and sent me to the ER. But essentially the prognosis is nothing major was damaged, no tears, no breaks, but I did bruise my spinal cord. And that can result in paralysis, permanent paralysis. So the precaution is just the neck brace. This keeps my head from moving around and lets that spinal cord heal. And I have a follow-up on the 21st. And if it checks out, then I can take this off and start resuming more or less normal-ish activity.
But not jiu-jitsu training.
No, I can go back to jiu-jitsu. I just have to be mindful of it, and I have to like slowly incorporate it back. But what really sucks about this, I've been training for world champs for the last 4 months at a very intense pace. Basically, I put everything on the back burner to train as hard as I possibly could for this event, and so I'm out of that event. There's next year, but it is a bummer.
Which obviously, I know how hard you've been working at it, and obviously one thing is we had to put this podcast on hold basically because you had so much going on.
Yeah.
But so I guess that's the good thing here is we can do the podcast. I mean, I'm not wishing. I'm not like saying
Josh,
I'm glad.
Big dick.
I'm just trying to see the brighter side of things here, right? Anyways,
Yeah,
hopefully you recover quickly, and we've been in touch a lot, so I
Yeah,
feel
the
bad
conversation we had was basically like, hey, Josh, I can't think about anything other than this tournament. And so even though we had planned on coming back, it was basically me giving you the Heisman for another month. So yeah, silver linings, I guess, buddy.
All right, so we're here, and you got to look at Brandon in a neck brace, at least for a little while. So other than that, I've been making a few videos. My production level has not been as high as I'd like to in terms of like volume, but I made a few videos about anamorphic lenses. I made a really detailed user guide on anamorphic lenses. If you've never shot on anamorphic, you should definitely check that out. I reviewed Thank you, man. The Laowa nanomorphs, and then I just reviewed the breakthrough variable ND filter. Interesting results. You should definitely check out that video too.
That was also a really good video.
Thanks, man. Yeah, those things take a while, but I think they're valuable for people. So, also some new movies. I just want to talk about movies for a second because there's been some big stuff going on there. I saw Asteroid City. Did you see that a little while ago?
I haven't seen it. You've been telling me to go see it because I am a Wes Anderson fan, and that's like his most Wes Anderson film yet, but I have not seen it yet.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to spoil anything there. I enjoyed going. My wife and I went, and we just left and we're like, wow, that was definitely like, I feel like the most Wes Anderson. That was like, full Wes Anderson in that movie.
Yeah.
Also Oppenheimer at IMAX. I know both of us went within like the first day or two of it coming out. So that was cool.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you think? You like it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I will never go back to that movie theater again though, because the movie didn't start playing right away, and they left us in the dark for like 15 minutes, and then didn't even start the movie. No one explained what was going on, and then they turned the house lights on. It was like a half an hour late, and they just skipped the previews, and like no one explained anything. That place is a total disaster. that movie theater.
And that's a long movie, so you were sitting on your butts for like 4 hours for that.
And it's not in those like comfy reclining chairs. It's in the IMAX theater, so it had the like normal old school chairs. Which
our IMAX theater has the big comfy chairs.
All right. Well, I'm again not going back to that theater. So, but I know that there's a lot of things to talk about that movie, which maybe we'll talk about in a future podcast about special effects. And I know you were talking to me beforehand about like how some movies are like way overdone with special effects, and some are. It's just
The Flash. The Flash is the worst movie I think I've ever seen, and it's because of their absolute ridiculous amount of VFX that they used in situations they had no need for VFX, and it just ruined the movie. So yeah, I think the dichotomy between the Flash and the Oppenheimer would make for actually a good podcast episode.
All right, maybe we'll get into that. I was really blown away with Oppenheimer in a lot of different ways, and I really look forward to like maybe watching it home when that's available, and I can really like think about it more because I was there to just like experience it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
So all right. I know we have a lot of stuff to cover in this podcast. So first of all, we got to get to the first standard is what did we buy?
Buckle up.
So I guess I'll start. I didn't really buy anything, but I traded/bought some stuff.
Josh, you were bartering like a mofo.
So I'm a big fan of trading. This is like my new thing. I really like doing this. If you can find something to trade for, you don't have to worry about like selling things and dealing with all that and then losing money with fees and all that stuff. And then, you're kind of helping both parties out. So basically I traded my R3. I'm not going to get into the details, but essentially I took my R3 and a little bit of money and got an R5C and an R5.
Wow.
So there was like a three-way trade and buying, and it was complicated. But anyways,
so now I have those. And
yeah, there was.
Somebody got a goat.
Luckily, not me. My wife said no goats here after like having chickens and ducks for like 5 years. But yeah, I'm excited about this. I was using the R3 only for basically like wildlife stuff, and it was just like a lot. It's a lot of camera for that, and it works great. But the R5 is also fantastic. It's smaller, it's cheaper. And what I realized, I'm starting to do a little bit more photo along with the video stuff and having resolution. I know this is like a no-brainer for people that do photography, but for a videographer, when I upped from like 24 megapixels to 45, night and day difference for photography for wildlife. It's like so handy. So
it is. You don't need it, but it's not bad to have. Right?
It's really nice. I got away with a couple shots. I was like, this would not have happened if I couldn't have cropped that much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyways, I want to talk, maybe we'll do an episode on the R5C, Brandon. I'm wondering if we should do some episodes like on certain cameras, if that makes sense. But anyways, besides that, that's pretty much all I have going on. Brandon, you bought and returned, I guess, the ZVE1. You tried that out for a bit?
Yeah, I did. That happened, a month ago, because I had it for nationals, and I just was having some issues. I'm having a hard time remembering what those issues were. One, I think ergonomically, I loved how small it was, but they weren't the ergonomics I was looking for. It did feel toyish in some way. Oh yeah, the autofocus. Everybody raves about the autofocus, and I was having a hard time with it. It was, the only thing I used it for was like vlogging, and it was hunting quite a bit on me. I think that was the most frustrating thing. Most people would bring up the overheating, but I never had that issue because I shoot such short clips with it. So that wasn't it. It was more or less just the autofocus, and when I pick up the FX3, it feels really good. I really like shooting with the FX3. The ZV-E1 just wasn't the same. So I was like, well, I'd rather send this back, keep the money, and put that towards an FX3 at some point.
Cool. Yeah, I totally feel you on the ergonomics and the usability of that camera. But what you were trying to use that for was, yeah, go ahead.
Can I go? So you brought up the R5C. That was my other point. It was like, I have an R5C, and after all of these updates, it's a more capable camera than it was. The autofocus is better. The battery life is better with some caveats. Like, do I really need to buy another camera to do what this can? I mean, that camera is big, especially with the 15 to 35. But that's why I bought, speaking of things we bought, I bought the 16 mil 2.8. And so like that's a really good vlogging camera, and it takes amazing photos. So anyway, quick little interjection there.
Yeah, I was going to bring all that up because I know the R5C has been a camera that you've had for a little while now, and you've been trying to use it for a vlogging situation and trying to look for other options, FX3, ZVE1. But having that small lens, I think, makes that camera a lot more portable. And I'm excited to use the R5C. I'm mainly going to use it in my studio, but I'm also realizing that we're not going to see a lot of new Canon cameras in the near future. And I kind of want to make some more R5C content because there's not a lot out there, so I don't know.
No, there's not. You know, there's a couple people that have like leaned hard on that camera and have made some really good content, and I think you should definitely do it.
Yeah. I mean, I made some content on it last year when it came out. I made a bunch of videos about it, but that was like,
Yeah.
a year ago, and things have changed. It's a different camera. So Brandon, you did make a big Komodo or Red purchase.
Yeah, a while ago I made my first like rigging video. You know, I put together kind of like my run and gun minimalist rig, and I didn't use a monitor for that. I used my phone, and that works really, really well. But it's not going to ever be as good as like a dedicated monitor. And I have a Shinobi, but the problem I found with the Shinobi is that it overheats. Like if you get into a hot situation and it's bright, I've had the LCD like warp colors. And I also like the idea of not using the SDI and freeing that up for, 4K like wireless for like Video Village. And even though the Small HD, the DSMC3 Red monitor is nearly $3,000, I bit the bullet and I bought it. And I used it over the weekend filming a big volleyball tournament. And it worked flawlessly. This monitor, when compared to the Shinobi, even though it's 7-inch, it's actually smaller, it's thinner, no overheating whatsoever, and having camera control is so nice on it. I didn't think it would be that big of a deal, but my God, like what you can do on the menu, everything, it's just such a nice monitor. And then, it's essentially wireless. It just uses that one RMI, and it uses the pogo pins, and I'm using it as a feed right now. So yeah, I really like it.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations on that. I know we talked about in our Red episode about the Red tax and their accessories. And, it's like they're really good, but they're really expensive. I'm like, like the Outrigger handle, for example, it's like $475 or something, but it's really nice. You know what I mean?
The KX with the monitor and that top handle was just so clutch. It just worked so well. It's so expensive, but it worked so well. So I'm happy.
That's awesome, man. And I'm actually shooting on my Komodo today, so
I know.
Trying to use it a little bit more for different things. Might be in my studio for a bit. We'll see.
Looks right.
All right, so let's talk about Sony, which is, of course, we'll get into some other news and rumors. We'll start off with Sony and then come back to them. So a couple of new releases. I know this is probably a few weeks ago, but we haven't had a podcast since. They came out with their new 70-200 f4G lens, so the Mark II. Mm-hmm. It's smaller, it's lighter, it also does macro, and it will accept the teleconverters. And if you use the 2x teleconverter, I believe you get up to a 1-to-1 macro. So and from everything I've seen, it's super sharp, super clean, really good optics. It's also like $1,700, so pretty pricey. But they did make a difference in their design, and now it telescopes in and out. It's not like a fixed zoom. So I actually prefer that in most situations because it packs smaller in your bag.
Same. I have the Canon version, the RF 70-200 f4, and that lens is so good, and it's so tiny.
Yep,
love it.
Yep. So in addition to that, they came out with a new compact on-camera microphone. I'm sure you're never going to remember this name. The ECM-M1.
I've seen it. Yeah, it looks like a butt plug. Yeah, I've seen it.
All right, so I haven't heard much about it, but they have another microphone. Now they have like 3 of those like guys that slide on the top.
Yeah, it's got like the 8 different directional,
Okay.
Put it in there.
Okay. And as you just mentioned, it has another use as well. So there is, but the biggest release is the A6700, which we're going to get into. Basically an FX30 in a smaller body, but that's a big part of the discussion today. There are 2 big Sony rumors that are on the table right now. The A7C Mark II, which I made a video about my predictions. Basically, from everything I've heard, it's going to be an A7 IV in a smaller body, just like they did with the A7 III and the A7C. So no surprises there from what I've heard. The one thing that was interesting is they're going to come out with an A7C R. So this is, from the rumors, a A7R5 inside of an A7C body.
Gotcha.
So 61 megapixel.
Will it explode upon turning on?
So I'm assuming they're gonna like cripple the video capabilities.
Yeah, I would assume that if they don't want people's cameras to melt.
Yes. Or they just let them melt because that's kind of...
Sony's like, listen, it's on you. We're giving you everything you asked for.
Doesn't mean it's going to run for a long time, but it does...
in your hand. That's on you.
This is like Canon 2020. It does 8K for like 5 minutes, you know?
Yeah. Anyways, camera burns.
I'm really curious about the price when it comes out, because having a tiny bodied 61 megapixel Sony camera is pretty cool, man. I mean, that's... I mean, we'll see about the price. That's my big thing.
Sigma tried it. We'll see if Sony has a better go of it.
Yeah, and I would also love to see them come out with a new RX1R. That would be cool if they put something with a fixed lens, like a really
Is the
cool...
RX1R like the GoPro?
No, that's a different camera. I think it's RX1R. It's the one that's got the like 35mm lens on it.
Oh yeah, they did do that, and then they had like a Mark II version of that.
Yeah,
camera.
I'd love to see a Mark III.
I think Justin Phipps or Justin Phillips, I can't remember his last name. I think he did a really good review on it.
Yeah,
it's an interesting camera.
Yeah. All right. So moving along, the FX9 got a price reduction, which was kind of quiet, but it went from 11,000 to 10,000.
Oh.
So maybe that's a response to the C500 Mark II price drop from 16 to 11,000. I don't know. I haven't heard any rumors about a new FX9, but that's in my opinion, the next camera to get updated from Sony.
Oh, okay.
All right, so a couple of new releases. Sirui came out with their Nightwalker lenses, which look like a fantastic budget cinema lens offering. I've been in touch with them. Maybe they might send me one. I don't know. We'll see.
Crazy affordable. I mean, affordable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all relative, but for what you're getting, 1.2s, 3 lenses for like $900 if you buy them all together. That's insane.
Yeah, so just so everyone knows, they're Super 35 or APS-C lenses. There's a 24, a 35, and a 55, and they come in E, RF, X, and Micro Four Thirds. So a lot of options.
Yeah.
It's becoming a very competitive space, that sort of like budget cinema lens world.
Good.
Yeah, options are good. Canon came out with all their new firmware updates that we were talking about earlier on in the year for their cinema cameras, C70, C300 Mark III, C500 Mark II. I know like the C70 got there's a couple things, but one was like the back of the head autofocus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So some cool stuff in there.
What is that movie with the the face back app or something a guy creates?
You can take a picture of anybody's face, and I'll tell you what the back of his head looks like.
Face back.
Face back.
Got some horrible reviews.
An app where you can look at the back of somebody's head and it will chart out like what their face looks like. I don't know why that came to my mind, but
I don't know that one. All right.
Face back app.
There's rumors about a new Blackmagic camera. There was just that one thing I saw that potentially working on a full frame L mount camera.
Oh,
so
interesting.
I think it would be a really interesting move. I see pros and cons about them going to L mount. So
yeah,
Blackmagic is so overdue for a new camera, man. So
yeah,
hopefully we see that.
Chomping at the bit.
Yeah, and they're such a disruptor, so whatever they come out with will shake things up, which is great. Even if you don't wind up going with the Blackmagic, everyone benefits from those cameras.
Absolutely.
So Brandon, there was a new light that you were excited about that you want to talk about.
It's funny. We talked about this a while ago. Like IntelliTech makes their like Mega Cloth light, which is just a massive light mat. It's huge, 300 watts or whatever. But they came out with a version 3 of it, and they basically improved everything. It's a light that I'm personally interested in. I'm very much into lights. It would be an absolutely killer like top-down light, but light mats are nice because they give you huge soft sources, but they're much smaller profiles than a massive softbox. But right when that was supposed to come out, they also have like a RGB WW version. I think an RGB version of it. Godox came out with 3 new ones, a 200 watt, a 400 watt, and a 600 watt for like half the price. So those aren't RGB, they're bicolor, but those also look extremely promising. So some really cool light mats if you want a large, powerful, soft light source for pretty cheap. So if you're on productions, it's a good way to go.
I don't have any experience with Godox, but they're continuing to make products. I know a lot of people use them pretty reliably, and
I've had this Godox VL150 since it came out, and it's a little champ. Works
cool.
great.
That's good to hear. It's always good to have cheaper options because it makes them more available for people, and also puts the pressure on the guys that are making more expensive stuff.
Yeah, the IntelliTech I think is like 2,200,
Wow,
and the
okay.
Godox version is like 1,100. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So one thing I do want to mention is the actor strike. And this is definitely something most people know about. I know Brandon and I were hopefully working on a production later this year, which we can't really talk about, but got pushed back because of this. And I don't know. It's just frustrating to see all this stuff. And like the writers haven't even sorted out their situation yet either.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know too much about it other than it's a tale as old as time. Giant corporations screwing over the little guy. So,
yeah, I mean, the big thing is it's kind of like things need to be up to date because most of it has to do with streaming and how most of the contracts and residuals and stuff were sort of made for, like movies and TV shows and stuff like that. But now streaming is like a whole different world. And then there's this whole AI component of like the likenesses.
AI component's crazy.
Yeah. So anyways, maybe we can talk about that more in our other podcasts about movies and stuff.
At some point, Josh, we really need to do a collaboration with somebody. It might be good to get an expert in the field and have them clear the air.
Yeah, because we don't know much about this. We're not really in that world. We kind of work by ourselves most of the time. All right, so let's get on to talking about the A6700, which sort of leads into our discussion. Now, I want to have a disclaimer up front here before I start like getting into it about Sony because I have some gripes that I need to talk about, which is kind of what this podcast is going to be about.
I'll put a big warning up on the screen.
I'm a Sony owner. I'm a Sony user. I use their cameras regularly for work, for client work, for YouTube. I'm not about to jump ship to another brand. Like I shoot on a lot of different cameras. But there's some things that bother me. And like, if you watch this podcast, Brandon and I don't hold back about certain brands, probably gets us in trouble more.
We stick it to them when they need to be stuck.
So first of all, as we said, I don't know if we said this before, $1,400 camera, same sensor out of the FX30. So it's a 26 megapixel. It does all the same video modes. So 10-bit 422 up to 4K 60. This actually is a 1.04 times crop in that, but you still get all the same codecs that you'd get in the FX30. You can do 4K 120 with a heavier crop. This is an APS-C camera, but it crops in more in 4K 120. But it does let you shoot 4K 120. Like expected, we got the new AI stuff for the new autofocus. So technically, it's probably better than the FX30 because we get that AI chip. We also still get the same 6K oversampled 4K. So basically what you'd expect, right? One thing is that this line of 6000 series cameras has needed to be updated for a long time. And so what they did was they made a slightly bigger body. They gave us a third exposure control, which, yes, I think people were definitely asking for that. Same battery, same 3-inch, 1.03 million dot normal flippy screen. So low res like usual with Sony. It doesn't have that cool tilty flippy screen like the A7R5.
Does it have the same screen as the ZV-E1?
I don't remember the specs off the top of my head.
Oh, that screen sucks.
It's probably the same screen, if I had to guess.
That screen is hot garbage.
Yeah, so I noticed that every time they make a really budget camera or the cheaper level, they always put the worst screens in there. It has a really small EVF that's pretty bad from what I've heard. So I haven't used this camera. Same IBIS as the FX30. It does have a mechanical shutter though, which the FX30 does not because this is more of a hybrid camera. Has one card slot and micro HDMI. So yeah, some of the stuff is like, yeah, we should have just had all this stuff already. Like getting a third exposure control and a slightly bigger body is like, yeah, people like we know that we should have had this years ago. You know what I mean? So again, no surprises with this. The thing that I have been talking about lately is overheating, and this is such a different take from all the creators that are reviewing this. But I'm just seeing this trend of all of these camera manufacturers making smaller bodied cameras with the same guts from bigger cameras, and they overheat. Sony, I think, is the worst of them for doing this. Now, they're not being sold as dedicated video cameras, but people are using these as hybrid cameras, and people are using them more and more for video content creation. Maybe not client work necessarily, but for filming themselves, podcasting, recording in a studio. A6700, ZVE1 from Sony are the ones that sort of stick out right now. And then, of course, the Canon R8, I'm going to throw that in there too.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, for me, and I bet for you, just because where we are and what our video demands are, we don't give these like a second look. But I'm assuming Sony's marketing these to content creators, people that are posting mostly to like social media. For me, if that is the case, I don't necessarily see the problem because those clips are going to be so short that overheating's probably not going to be a thing. Would you agree, disagree?
Depends on where you are and what you're doing. So, like I know our friend Jeff from Reach Films, he just got an A6700 and tested it out, and he's in Florida, and it ran for 18 minutes outside.
Like constantly recording?
Yeah, he turned it on, talked to the camera, 18 minutes. It was, he actually tried to use the camera for recording his video, and like he had to record it 3 times because it kept on overheating.
Yeah, that is frustrating.
So
I'm just wondering if Sony has niched down that camera to the person that shoots 20-second to 2-minute clips and then turns off their camera.
I think that's the only way you can actually use that camera. You know, and then you see a lot of people reviewing the camera, and they'll do run times in their studios. And one thing I want to point out about Sony cameras, which I don't hear a lot of people talking about, is that if you have an HDMI plugged into your Sony camera, I'm not talking about like the FX3, FX30, things with fans, or the A7S3, but like the other cameras, like the A7 IV or the ZVE1 or the A6700, probably, if you have HDMI plugged in, they overheat faster. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, no one's talking about this. And I did this on the ZVE1, I believe, in my review, that it ran less time when I had HDMI plugged in. And that's 2 of the times I had the A7 IV overheat. That's what was going on. So in a studio situation, if you're using a monitor or something going on, or you're using the camera to do a podcast and you're recording internally, like, it's going to overheat faster.
Yeah. You know, this is, for me, I think where I would get the most frustrated is that, like, I'm on YouTube a lot. I'm seeing what's going down, and I didn't see much from the A67 perspective being a potential issue. You know what I mean? Out of all those reviews that came on, it was like, this is a great, fantastic camera, and that could definitely be the case, but is it a great, fantastic camera in a very certain, specific situation? Because if it overheats that fast, whew, that kind of sucks. I mean, that's why I returned the R8. Like, it overheated super fast, even though I shot like I shoot, like, 15, 20-second clips, just a ton of them.
Yeah, but a good chunk of the year you're outside and it's warm where you live, so that can be a problem. I mean, there's a lot going on, but one thing is these are hybrid cameras. So like the A6700 is a fantastic photo camera, first of all. Mm-hmm. And then if you buy it for that and you take a couple of short clips and you're not using it for long form video, I think it's a totally viable option.
Then it's good to go. Yeah.
If you need the reliable video camera, get the FX30.
Do you think, not to jump ahead, but to me it seems like maybe the issue is that their lineup is getting too crowded.
It is, and yeah, we're definitely going to talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I do want to make a couple more comments about the A6700. First of all, they're still selling it with that crappy 16-50 kit lens. I think they need to
throw that
update
in the garbage.
They need to update that. Which I thought was funny when the ZVE1 came out, and I mentioned this in the podcast, I think, and had the same 28-60 kit lens, or maybe it was in my ZVE1 video, and I'm like, how is this a kit lens for a vlogging camera? I do want to talk about the sensor in the FX30, because I mentioned this, I think, in a live stream on my channel, because it's the same as the FX30, and I have a theory about this sensor, which leads us into the heart of this discussion, that this is actually, when the FX30 came out, there was a whole thing that this was like a new sensor. Mm-hmm. And when I started testing it and getting into low light and dynamic range and all the stuff that I like to do in my nerdy world, it didn't feel like a new sensor to me. Like I can usually tell when I start digging in, like this is better than kind of what's out there, or this kind of looks older. And it definitely had that feel to it. Now, what my theory is, and this has not been verified, so if anyone actually knows if this is true or not, let me know in the comments. I think it's the same setup as the A7R4. And what they did was they just chunked out the center of that sensor and then made an APS-C version of it. So from a design perspective, they didn't have to R&D it because they already had the die or whatever, I don't know the tech specs, like what it's called. Now, the A7R4 came out in July of 2019. And so this isn't like a new sensor, and it's a fantastic sensor because they also use it in the A7R5, which everybody loves. I haven't got a chance to use that camera yet. But one thing I wanted to sort of talk about here is that when you take the A7R5 in the APS-C crop mode, remember it has a 1.5 times crop, which is the same crop in the A6700. It does a 6.2K oversample. You can look this up. And the A6700 has a 1.04 times crop in video. I know this is a lot of numbers. But when you do that crop, that's where you get the 6K oversample. So to me, it's like really lines up really well with the specs of the sensor from the A7R4 and A7R5. It also has that dual base or informal dual base ISO of 2500. So I think they're the same sensor. It's like you took like a cake and then you just like cut out the middle of the cake. And that's the one that we're getting.
You basically are making donut holes with sensors.
There you go. Perfect. We brought it back to a food analogy here.
I love donuts. So.
Me too. I know we ate quite a few donuts in Vegas. Yeah. So why does this? So this doesn't bother me in the sense that they're recycling their tech because all these companies do this. But one thing was with the A6000 series when we waited for a while before they came out with a new one, and now I think that they're just going to be using this same sensor for the next 4 or 5 years. And I was really hoping for like a new sensor for the APS-C cameras, and we didn't quite get that.
So it's not something that we're posing, or at least you're posing as like, it's not ethically wrong. It's just a bummer.
Yes.
Because maybe we're taking a 4-year sensor and we're going to stretch that out to like 9 years.
Yes, which is kind of what they did with the 6000 series. And I do want to talk about that too. But what we're really talking about is we're talking about Sony's recycling program. In general, they take a camera and then rehouse it, or take a sensor and processing and rehouse it, maybe add a couple new features, like we got focus breathing compensation, and then those aren't available in older and more expensive cameras, which is we've complained about with the firmware updates and all that kind of stuff. And other companies do this too. This isn't just Sony. So I do want to point that out. Like Fuji.
Yeah, Fuji, that's kind of how they do things.
Yeah, like their 4 series cameras, Brandon. Like
they make a sensor and then they put it in different bodies because those bodies are catered to like a certain kind of user. So like your XT3, that like the XH1, I think. No, it didn't have the same. But yeah, like you mentioned, the 4 series, like the XT4, the X Pro 3, the XE4. God, there's a lot of different cameras.
I know, X100V.
The X100V, right? they all had the same sensor, But that's just how they do things. And for some, I don't know, like, I guess let me ask you, do you give Fuji more of a pass doing that than you do Sony, or are you not saying that at all?
Well, I mean, to me, the way Fuji markets it, it's like we have our sensor, right? And then which flavor do you want of it? Do you want the really tiny one with the fixed lens? Do you want one that's tiny that has an interchangeable lens? Do you want the bigger one that's got the retro dials? And that to me is kind of like, which sort of step of that do you want? They're not saying these are all different cameras. They kind of all do the same thing. Just what sort of design, what shape do you want it in?
Yeah.
So it's just a different way of marketing it and selling their products.
But the question is, does it upset you more that Sony does it their way?
Yes. Because they bring it out as a new camera, right? And then you can't get the features in those cameras, like they're in those cameras and the older cameras, even though it's the same thing inside, and they just market it as a new camera, and it just seems like they're constantly coming out with cameras to try to market and sell to people as like, oh, you need the new camera, you need the new camera, you need the new camera.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
So
there
again,
is
we're not
more time between the Fuji Like the way Fuji disseminates that sensor to cameras, like there are far fewer cameras and it takes a whole lot longer.
Right. So like the XT5 came out, right? So like when are we going to see the XE5 or the X100 or whatever?
The X Pro 4. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. But I'm, again, not giving it past other camera companies. Like the Canon R6 Mark II, they did the same thing with the R8. Like this, like they made it smaller, cheaper, overheats more, less functional. You know what I mean? Took out IBIS, all that stuff. The Nikon Z9 and Z8 was also an interesting situation where they just took the Z9, put in a smaller body, and then shaved off a couple $1,000s.
And apparently they might be putting it in a new camera as well.
I know. I hope,
or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. The rumors have been flying around about that. If they do come out with that for like $2,000 is what I heard, that would be, because that's a stack sensor, full frame stack sensor for $2,000. I'd love to see that.
That'd be pretty intense. Hopefully it pays homage to those old Nikon the F3s and F4s. That'd be cool.
Yeah. Okay, so I do want to give a couple examples about the recycling, because I did some research on this. The A6300, so going back a little ways now, came out in February of 2016. And basically a version of this sensor, slight tweaks of it, but basically a version of the sensor we used in all of the 6000 series cameras, other than the 6000. That one came out before. So 6300, 6500, 6400, 6600, 6100, and the ZVE10 was the last camera with that sensor, which came out in August of 2021. So from 2016 to 2021, basically the same sensor in that camera.
Yeah.
Okay. And I own a ZVE10. Like, it's a great camera. So I'm not like hating on this, but it's just like, let's get some new stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. From a business standpoint, that seems pretty smart. Like, don't you think it would be really hard to like put new sensors in every single camera?
Yeah, the R&D would be crazy, and you'd have inconsistency between colors and matching cameras and all that stuff. But from a business perspective, this makes complete sense. I'm just complaining about it from a camera reviewer and a camera user. You know what I mean? I like to see some innovation.
Guys, the reason we started a podcast is so we could just complain on a platform. Duh. That was the whole point of this.
Okay. So let me just drive this point home one more time here with another list of examples here. So I looked at the last 13 Sony releases, 15 if you include the two rumored cameras, the A7C2 and the A7CR.
Josh.
Only 3 of them. Go ahead.
I feel like you're going to uncover some massive conspiracy here.
It's not a
right
conspiracy.
around
This
the
is just
corner.
like,
it's going to involve the Queen, England, all sorts of stuff.
This is just facts. This is just like what I came up with.
All
Well,
right.
my conspiracy or theory was the FX30 sensor in the A7R4. So that I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, it's all linked to Matty Hopya.
I love how you can never get anyone's name right, Brandon.
Yeah, I don't know.
Big disclaimer again. Brandon can't get anyone's name right, or Sony. Hapoya. And you can't get the model numbers right either with Sony cameras. So that's,
Dude, as you were going, you were like A6100, A6500, A6400. I'm like, does it keep going up or does it go back down? Like, how does that work?
That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. All right. So again, including the 2 new rumored cameras, 15 cameras, I would say that only 3 of them were actually like new designs. Everything else was like a tweak of something else. So starting with the A7S III, which came out in July 2020 was when it was announced. We have, in chronological order here in terms of releases, the A7C, same as the A7 III. FX6, same as the A7S III. The A1 was a completely new camera. FX3, A7S III. ZV-10, as we said, 6000 series cameras. The A7 IV was a new camera. So we've only seen 3 actual new cameras, the A7S III and the A1 and the A7 IV.
Do you think if Sony watches that, they're like,
yeah,
duh.
Yeah. I'm just saying what came out. So following that, we have the FX30, which in my opinion was the A7R4 sensor. We had the ZV-1F, which everyone forgot about. That was the ZV-1 inside. The A7R5 has the sensor from the A7R4. The ZVE1 has the sensor from the A7S III. The ZV-1 Mark II is the ZV-1. The A6700 is the FX30, and then the A7C2 and the A7CR. Okay, I went through the whole list. You don't need to follow all that.
I gotta hand it to you, man. I don't know what kind of like superfood you're on if you're just drinking like liters of mangosteen a day, but how you keep track of all that is mind blowing.
Well, I prepared for this podcast because I wanted to sort of give examples of why I think this, because I went back and looked and I was like, wait a minute, how much is recycling is there going on here, right? Is it like half the cameras? Is it like most of the cameras?
For me, when we talk about like the potential of the A6700 being drip fed to these other cameras, it's like, are we just going to go up in price even though we potentially could be using an older sensor and an even older sensor and an even older sensor? That's maybe where it gets a little sketchy, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what was interesting
Do
was...
you have like a thing on your wall with like the yarn that's connected, and then there's like the big boss with a question mark, and then Maddie's over here on another one, and
Yeah, it's the guy from It's Always Sunny. What's his name? With the
Charlie,
you know that
maybe
Charlie. Yeah, he's got the whole like conspiracy theory thing going on. No, but I keep track of what's going on so I can sort of get a sense of it. And one thing was interesting, like you just brought about the pricing, was that Sony tends to bring out new cameras at a higher price point and not reduce them. And we've talked about this, I believe, before. Mm-hmm. But the A6700 actually came out at $1,400, which is what the A6600 was. Oh, okay. So that was interesting to me. I like to see that. Yeah. Anyways, long list of cameras they're recycling. Again, I don't know. Well, there's still a couple of new things we're waiting for. The A9 III, which keeps getting rumored. In my opinion, that will be a new sensor, and that will sort of up all of the lines to like their new 10-bit with new color science and all the new menu system and all that stuff. And then maybe we'll start to see some new other ones too. But so the big question I have to pose here, is this a problem? Like, is this something that we should be upset about or not upset about? What do you think, Brandon?
I don't think... I would say no, because I tend to agree with the GX Ace on a point of, at some point, the image quality is just good enough. And so, like, a C200 still looks amazing, right? Like, in 5 more years, it's still going to look amazing. I guess the only problem I would have is if they were to continue to make new model, and even if those model numbers were technically under or whatever, it's just from a pricing standpoint. It's not from an image quality standpoint. It's not from like an ethics standpoint. I don't really see the problem with recycling anything as long as that recycling or that sensor or whatever wasn't marketed as new. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I guess it can be a new camera and there's some gray area in there. But I don't know. I feel like it's like Fuji does a good job because they say it's their X-Trans 4 sensor or whatever, right? They're telling you what the sensor is and they put it in each camera. It'd be nice to know that kind of language in a camera, I guess, across every camera manufacturer, because I just think like the Ace, like the naming nomenclature for Sony and Canon, and it's just so confusing. It is.
I think the problem for me, well, first of all, this is clearly their strategy. So it's not like someone from Sony watched this and be like, it's like, yeah, they know this is what they're doing. Like there's no way around it, right?
But yeah, pretty soon they're going to hit a button and you're just going to keel over and Josh is done.
My problem with this is from someone who is reviewing cameras and offering advice for people to buy cameras. People are always asking me what cameras to buy. Mm-hmm. Their lineup is so confusing. And Canon is not good either. You know what I mean? No. Like it's, once you get in that bottom part, I don't know what's going on. There's just like less, as I said, you spend more money, you get less cripples. That's kind of how I think of the Canon line.
Like just give the cameras cool names or do it like Fuji. It's just, I don't know with Canon. I know the R3 is a good camera. The R5 is a good camera. But like, do we really have to name things R2D2? Like, can't we just like actually come up with kick-ass names for our cameras?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to keep track of. And now, as we're seeing, like, it's just confusing. Like, what do people buy, you know? And I think the big part for Sony is their marketing, their influencer marketing game is way up and beyond everyone else going on right now.
Yeah.
So to me, I just feel like I'm just getting fed all of this marketing. It's like new camera. You got to buy the new thing. It's got the new this thing. It's got the new AI. It's got the, and it's like, wait a minute, like what's going on here, right? We're just regurgitating products essentially with like slightly new things. And it just to me feels like, why don't you just slow down a little bit and just develop like a couple of cameras that are really cool?
I would prefer that too. Like, I really do like the way Fuji does things. I like the way Leica does things. I mean, they hold on to a camera for like 4 years and then they give you something. And so it's like, when I get a new thing from Leica, it's going to be a new thing. It's not going to be 10% new. And that's the feeling I get from some of these other camera companies.
So Red is a great example as well. And I think Canon on their higher end stuff is like that. Like the R5 is right. We haven't seen a new R5 and we haven't seen a new A7S3 yet. We haven't seen a new FX3 yet, but I think when the R5 II comes out, that's going to be a massive release for Canon.
Yeah, I think honestly, this ties into it, and I know it might be a little bit out there, but we're talking about like marketing. It's like when you have all of these influencers and YouTubers, and then they do a video that's like, is the Sony A7R5 still relevant in 2023? You're like, it's like 7 months old. What are you talking about? I kind of want to just slap that person.
Yeah, it just becomes a lot. And I don't know if it's also the price point, Brandon, because in that lower section, I think what we're seeing from Canon and Sony is they're trying to shove a camera in like every couple $100. Mm-hmm. Because I think maybe that like when you're buying a camera for $1,000 or $1,500, people are really shopping by price at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just trying to fill in all those slots, which Canon has been. I can't even remember all the releases, like R10, R50, R100. All those cameras.
Yeah. I'm not trying to play in it. God, Brandon, put it together. An elitist mindset, but it is. It's like it's just more crowded at the bottom, and so it's more confusing.
Yeah, and to me, I get frustrated with, the marketing, and when you say, oh, it's an A6700 is the same as an FX30, which is a very powerful video camera in a smaller body, and then you don't hear a lot of people talking about overheating.
I see what you're saying. I think it just clicked for me, like where your mindset is. Yeah. In that regard, I would be like, yeah, that's very misleading because it's not.
So I gotta, more people got to get these cameras that are like doing hardcore testing, and that sort of stuff. And I just feel like I tend to talk about these things in my videos, and I usually get pushback from people. And I'm just like, I don't know, this is what this camera does. Like, I need to make sure that people know that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, you're super brand agnostic, so I don't know why people like. It's just like, here are the facts. This is just it. I have no skin in the game.
Well, you were calling me a conspiracy theorist like 5 minutes ago, so.
Well, it certainly sounded like it, my friend.
So for me personally, it gets tricky with the helping people decide what camera to get and just making sure people understand what they're buying, because these aren't cheap, right? People are spending money to go above and beyond their cell phone now, and it's like, what are they getting for it? And I just hate to see someone buy a camera and then like want to do a podcast or something or long form, and then just like, what, it overheats? What? I didn't know that. I didn't see that in any of the reviews.
You do a really good job, like when you do your live streams. It's basically like a hotline where people can ask you these types of questions. You do a really good job of like clarifying what. That was weird. My TV just. I use it to actually add exposure. It's my fill light. It's my screen. But people hit you up, and you do a really good job of clarifying what it can and can't do. So I could see why it would be like pretty frustrating when somebody says it's the same as the FX30, and you're like, whoa, it's not. Let's be very clear, it's not.
Yeah,
that makes
sense. I appreciate
that.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do more live streams. So if you want to come and hang out and chat, I'm trying to do them once a week now. So,
all right, so cool. Thanks though.
All right, thanks, dude. You just come in and usually just like stir up the pot, Not you, but everyone else watching this. So what I personally want to see is I just want to see these companies like Sony slow down a little bit with their releases and come up with cooler cameras and see more innovation, because I'd like to see them spend more on R&D and less on marketing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I'm all for a company going, let's take it down a notch, and when we make something new, it's actually going to be new, and it's going to blow your mind. And let's let our work speak for itself. Like, we can have a 4-year-old camera that still commands like top dollar and still impresses people, so that when we come out with the second version of it, it's just going to blow your mind. I'm all for that.
And it was interesting when the A7R5 came out, because the obvious comparison was with the Canon R5. And it was like, man, the Canon R5 kind of still stacks up pretty well with the A7R5 2.5 years later, or whatever it was.
Yep.
So to me, that was like, okay, clearly, like, you know, the R5 had its issues, but, you know, it is holding up pretty well over time. And lastly, I just want to mention about the firmware stuff, because this sort of feeds into all this stuff too, because if you want the new specs, you got to get the new camera, and it just goes into the whole marketing and sales thing like we talked about. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
So any other thoughts about this, or, you know, things you'd like want to see a company like Sony do moving forwards?
No, I think we touched on all the points. One, I want you to completely rename your cameras and come up with cool names, not stupid names. Sony, you have stupid names for your cameras, but so does pretty much everybody else, so it's not just you. And then, yeah, I would like it to be less convoluted.
Yeah, easier to understand, and all that kind of stuff. And for anyone out there that is reviewing cameras and putting out content about it, like, just like let everyone know what's going on. You know what I mean? Because I'm getting a lot of comments from people. They're like, I watched 10 reviews and no one talked about overheating or whatever. Like, people need to be honest with this stuff, and that's hard for me to hear. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep. When Peter McKinnon is the guy that's giving the most honest review on a camera, something's up.
And he's paid by Canon.
Yeah.
All right, cool, Brandon. Well, hopefully we wrapped up Sony's recycling program and talked about my conspiracies or theories or whatever you want to call them. So
We did it.
I appreciate everyone coming to hang out and check this out. We're getting real close to our 1,000 subscribers. So if you're listening this far, and you haven't,
we're actually super close.
if you're listening this far into the podcast and you haven't hit subscribe, just hit the subscribe. It would be greatly appreciated.
Just do it now. It's free. It will cost you nothing, unless, of course, you're involved in Josh's wild conspiracy theory. Then it could cost you everything.
I just listed facts. The theory about the A7R4 FX30 sensor, that's a theory. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you guys real soon.
Peace.